Most supplements are useless, underdosed garbage, and you're probably wasting a shit ton of money on stuff that isn't doing anything for you because it's either underdosed or fake. They're made by dudes who don't really train. They take half a scoop, flex in the mirror, and then tell you that the flavor slaps or whatever the kids are saying these days. The way a supplement tastes is cool and all, I guess, but it's also pretty irrelevant. So if you're a 13-year-old girl who needs that kind of stuff, that's fine. But if you're a cop or a grappler or just a lifter who's training really hard and you're not addicted to dopamine, then what you would care more about is how well something works. Anyways, the guys at Hall Labs sent me some stuff to try out, so I want to do a little review and share with you guys what I thought. I use this stuff in my own training sessions, which, as a lot of you guys know, vary between shorter and more intense and then longer endurance efforts. So, the other thing that I was really interested in with these was seeing how well it would work and help me focus and perform outside of the gym, right? With my computer work and stuff with my business and things like that. So, there's some pretty interesting ingredients in some of this stuff. And yeah, I can't wait to go over it with you guys. All right. So, first up, Flood. This is probably one of my favorite pre workouts that I've ever tried. I know that's a bold statement. That's a big claim because I've tried a lot of them. The ingredients list is really solid, and one thing that I noticed about all of the Holo Labs supplements was that everything was dosed correctly. A lot of companies throw a ton of shit into their products, but everything is underdosed what would actually be effective. So stuff ends up looking good, has a long list, so people buy it, but then it's trash, right? So the Holo Lab stuff is actually designed with doses that are researched back, which I thought was pretty cool. Flood is pretty loaded, all right, guys. So inside we've got 8 grams of citrulline, which is the correct clinical dose. This is one of the lowest hanging fruits when it comes to getting a pump, oxygen delivery to the muscles, all that good stuff. So this is going to potentiate the pump, but is also going to be super beneficial in anything that's cardio related, like rolling in jiu-jitsu, running, stuff like that. So every single pre-workout, in my opinion, needs to have citrulline because it's extremely effective. And 8 grams is a pretty awesome, effective dose of this. All right, so next up is glycerol, right? So glycerol is another one that a lot of guys don't know about, but it's super effective at hydrating muscles and therefore also potentiating the pump. So it pairs really well with the citrulline here. Hydration is something a lot of people really don't understand, but you need to make sure that your muscles specifically are hydrated, which glycerol does by shifting the water when you drink it to where it needs to go. All right, so I'm out here in Arizona where it's like balls fucking hot, so I'm always I'm always dealing with dehydration when I'm out shooting a match, grappling, stuff like that. Glycerol is a great way to make sure that your muscles stay hydrated because this is specifically how you'd avoid cramps and torn muscles. Now, the greatest risk factor for torn muscles is the muscle itself being dehydrated. All right, so again, with the pump blend, this stuff is pretty impressive. We've also got a gram of arginine in here, which is a nitric oxide precursor. So this is going to basically do vasodilation, and it's the same thing as a citrulline in that it's going to give you a pump. Norvaline is also something that's in here, which is something that you don't see a lot, but I think it's a genius combo with the arginine because essentially what Norvaline does is it blocks the enzyme that breaks down nitric oxide. This means it's going to help you keep the pump longer because one of the other problems with pre-workouts is that you get a decent pump, but then 30 minutes later it's gone. It doesn't stick around. So Norvaline is actually a really genius move here and something that I really never see. All right, so then of course, the piece that everybody loves about pre-workouts, and frankly I do too, is the stims. Okay, so this one is actually formulated pretty well because it doesn't contain a lot of caffeine, maybe a little bit because of this green tea and coffee bean extract, but I'm not exactly too sure how much caffeine. So the awesome thing about the Holo Labs pre-workout stuff is these aren't just like jack you up, jittery, crazy, stims, right? These are actual nootropics that I use when I'm doing deep work, when I'm writing and things like that. So this is much more focused energy, which is something you don't see a lot in pre-workouts. So these could actually be used outside of the gym when you actually need to focus and think better. So the real heavy hitters in Flood are the Alpha GPC and the Huperzine A. So these are the kind of stims, again, like they don't crack you out for 30 minutes and then make you crash. I actually use Alpha GPC quite a lot to help me when I'm, focusing on programming with my clients, since some of you fuckers make me do a bunch of focusing. So yeah, when I'm running workouts every weekend, it really helps. There's 1,200 milligrams of alpha GPC in here, which frankly I think is a lot, but I love stims, so I'm not super mad about it. So again, this is more like locked in focus instead of jittery, anxious, energy like you get from caffeine or the stuff they used to put in the old Jack 3D formula, which, back in the day, I used to take a fuck ton of Jack 3D. If you guys are familiar with that stuff, that was like the ultimate pre-workout with a 1,3 methyl diamylamine in it. That ended up getting banned because I guess people were having heart explosions. But I don't know, couldn't be me. Sounds like a skill issue. So huperzine A is the other one that's in here. So this stops the breakdown of acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter that's involved in your focus and energy. Okay, so more acetylcholine is going to give you a better mind-muscle connection, faster reaction times, and then sharper focus. You know, when you would otherwise be very fatigued. So let's say you're doing something really high skilled, like shooting a match or even lifting when you're tired. This is one that I find is super helpful for dudes who are shooters or have some kind of task that requires, you know, fast reaction times, fine motor skills, stuff like that. All right. So next up, we have Berserker Serum. I fucking love the art on the label here. Honestly, I'd probably buy it just for that, even if the supplement sucks, but it doesn't. It's pretty cool. So this one's a liquid, and it kind of looks like this off-white milky color when you shake it up and drink it, which is a little weird. I don't know if that was intentional. But basically, so you take one or two caps depending on the dose you want. Okay. Honestly, this one is pretty similar to the flood with just a few different things. So it might just come down to which ingredients work better with your individual body chemistry. Okay. So the ingredients label has everything broken up into two parts. Okay. So you've got the pump blend and the focus matrix. So in the pump blend, again, we've got glycerol. Okay. So glycerol, we've got citrulline, but we've also got agmatine, betaine, and taurine. All right. So the betaine essentially supports power output and cellular fluid balance. Okay. So it's going to work synergistically with the glycerol, and the taurine is also very similar in that regard. So we're talking hydration, hydrating the muscles here. Okay. The focus matrix here has L-tyrosine, which is one that I've been diving into a lot recently. This one's got regular L-tyrosine, which is technically less potent than N-acetyl L-tyrosine or NALT. But for whatever reason, I noticed more of a focus benefit from regular L-tyrosine, which I know a lot of people have the same experience. 1 gram of this is a pretty decent dose, but if you take two capfuls, you get 2 grams, which might be a little bit too much in my opinion, depending on how sensitive you are to stuff like this. But to each their own. So you just want to be careful with stims like this because if you just want to be careful with stims like this because if you overstimulate, you get that like cracked out feeling in that crash. Okay. So then again, in here, we've got the alpha GPC. Basically, it's the same dose as flood. All right. So we've also got something called DMAE in here, which I'm too stupid to pronounce the actual name, but it's another nootropic and it's basically going to help with your focus and mental clarity. Okay. So it's only a minor stimulant, nothing crazy, but allegedly this stuff also has some anti-aging effects in the brain, but I'm not super familiar with it or how to dose it. So honestly, that part is kind of a write-off for me. All right, so we've got CDP choline. So this is going to help with learning, memory, coordination. Again, useful for anyone who's going to be doing anything cognitively demanding. And again, honestly, that's something that I like really love about all the Whole Labs pre-workouts is that the ingredients aren't just cheap throwaway stims. These are legit nootropics that like Wolf of Wall Street type dudes use to maximize their brain plasticity and focus when they're doing like whatever the fuck it is those nerds do. So lastly, this stuff also has huperzine A, which we talked about before, along with vinpocetine. I don't know if I can pronounce that right, but anyways, this is basically another one that's similar to the huperzine that basically just helps with blood flow in the brain, so it makes you smarter, which obviously I need more of. Anyways, I actually really like the Berserker Serum. Probably not as much as the Flood, but again, it's going to depend on what you respond to better, and what works better with your individual body chemistry. I mean, nootropics are pretty weird in general because everybody seems to have a different response to them, but if I had to pick one pre-workout between those two, personally, I would pick the Flood. Flood is definitely the clear winner for me. I've been using it every single training session for the last 2 months, and I freaking love it. It's literally the best thing I've ever taken. Hollow also sent me some creatine, but theirs seems pretty fairly priced. Creatine is creatine, but I trust the owner of this company. I trust the ingredients. I trust the purity here. Most of you guys are probably on creatine. I've been using theirs, and so far so good. So I know the science says you only need 5 grams, but what I found is that upwards of 10 or 15 grams is better for guys who are doing more cognitive stuff, right? So I have all my guys take creatine, but I usually suggest a higher dose for dudes who are doing, like high skill tasks, right? So like my shooters, my guys who are like matches and the range all day. All right, so the last one they sent me was some EAAs, which I know everyone's got a different opinion about, but basically EAAs are the building blocks of proteins. Okay, so they work synergistically with the food that you eat to make complete proteins that your body can actually use to build muscle. All right, so this is somewhat controversial because I know a lot of you guys out there are, on the carnivore diet. You're eating 500 grams of protein a day, which I think is unnecessary. But if you take EAAs, you don't need to eat 10 pounds of meat a day to get your protein in. Okay, so you can eat less meat, and then the EAAs fill in the gaps, and they turn the foods that have incomplete proteins in them, like your oats and rice, and they turn them into usable protein. Okay, not that I think meat is bad, but I do think that there is a balance to be had as far as nutrition and digestion goes with your diet. Okay, so essential amino acids definitely help here. So the Hall Labs EAAs in particular, though, are pretty neat because you also get some joint support stuff in here like collagen and glucosamine, which old fuckers like me and some of my clients need. So one of the best things in here actually is Cissus, which a lot of people don't know about, but I think is very underrated when it comes to joint health. So when I have clients with joint problems, I almost always have them take this. Okay. This is one of the cool things about the Holo Lab stuff is that you get way more bang for your buck. Like I would design these supplements this way if I could, because I can take one scoop of their EAAs and replace like 10 pills and expensive shit that I would have had to buy, individually on Amazon. Okay. So their EAAs also have a fair amount of coconut water extract, which again is going to keep your hydration up. So basically, all of your supplements from Holo Labs, for the most part, have some sort of hydration matrix in them, which is super legit. Right, I like that a lot. I think that's definitely an overlooked aspect of supplementation. All right, guys, so that about wraps it up. Overall, I'm a huge fan of Holo Labs. All right, I actually reached out to the owner after a couple weeks of using their stuff because I liked it so much. So we've got a little partnership in the works, okay? I've got a discount code to give you guys that I'll put down below in the description. If you do end up buying something from them, you can use the code high risk and you will get 10% off. If you do end up using some of their stuff, especially the Flood, hit me up. Let me know what you think. It's definitely been a game changer as far as my focus and my training goes. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.